So, so this is XORG session, who knows what number, but it is titled Further Play with Architecture, or Further Playing with Architecture, which means it's a continuation from last time, where we started with a very early hack of a game structure, which has been now updated, but we also saved some part of the play, and that's maybe one topic that we could visit in the beginning before we kind of dive in. But before that, like, any comments from the last time or thoughts afterwards, general thoughts upon this context? Table is free. Oh, come on. Somebody has to comment something.
I can maybe say so much that
You're quite quiet.
It's because
it's the mic in the back. Yeah,
the mic is in the back of my head.
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, done the same mistake.
And I have the mouth on the wrong side. I found it mega inspiring last time, and I also felt this kind of sense of like having to, get used to the ball in a way. Like it's not that it really felt like having to train this a bit, kind of, where's the thing rolling, where is it not rolling, where are kind of habits of thought that put you in a dead end, and this I thought that was really kind of inspiring in a pretty literal sense of
like, although I really like that quality, even outside, like we talked last time, the kind of game structure we're creating shouldn't be just the kind of university case we followed like a few weeks ago, but I find it really interesting to play with this quality of that we kind of mined out in the earlier play, how really like generation is very close to kind of learning situation, because like if you're asked a question and you have to produce an answer, that's really a generated question. The only difference is kind of like the evaluation, and also like that the sense of challenge is connected to learning. We can even go to brain science with this, like that the acetylcholine bridging, which is the last remaining brain-changing factor for over 25s, roughly is a stress factor. It utilizes cortisol also so it might be a micro stress, but there is no brain changing without minor elements of stress by current brain chemistry. So they like this feeling is like, of course one shouldn't go overboard with it, but it's I think it's a interesting one, but of course, like, it's good to kind of keep tabs on it when it does go overboard. But yeah, like, I agree on your comments. Anybody else?
Yeah, I also found it very inspiring and productive, and I would very much like to kind of explore different settings and scenarios, and of course it has been evolving and developing as well. What I like a lot is that okay, we have this kind of dungeon type of like modularity underneath right now, but at the same time, like I can easily see how this can become a kind of modular and kind of a system, like in a sense that okay, you can change textures, you can change the theme or something like that, and build on top of this. So I see the system likeness in this sort of like architectural games or so on. And what I really liked as well was when you sent the kind of detailing message a few days ago, where you kind of brought it into the context of kind of very easy syntax as well, to help the imagining these settings and the scenes. So I like that a lot. Yeah.
It's kind of learnings from years that like we are really good at things that are might be complex actions, but are kind of coded into us or ingrained into us from some convention, and language is full of them. Like we can do really complex actions, and then you take an action of same complexity that we haven't been trained, and it's like deathly difficult or feels stressful. So the more you can tap into something that is kind of has some resemblance of an existing structure is useful. Like and towards the kind of system quality, this is also like, well, one of the reasons why I kind of rewrote the whole thing. Like just to kind of make it's kind of more bony now. Well, it was bony to begin with, but it's kind of separated, etc. Could even do a little bit more of separation, but it's a sort of like a topic, subtopics, bullet points kind of semi-modularity that is present there. That this is partly because what you were saying, Mikael, that like if one can entertain other systemic possibilities around it, and then moving to them is probably more easier if you have the pieces in piece form, so to speak, like a more modularly approach. So so yeah, I was writing it on Markdown, but which is this very bullet pointed formalism, or bullet point friendly formalism. But yeah, we could, unless there are small comments, we could dive in a little bit what's changed. Like it's not much, but it's good to go through, and at the same time maybe summarize the main things for Dustin. Is that okay? Yeah. All right. So I'll share the document. Why not? I mean, you should all have an access to it, but I'll share it nonetheless. So let's do that. Okay. Okay. Let's start from the beginning, which is the horrible name, like or name candidates, which I don't like, but you know there had to be something. If somebody has better names, be welcome. And I thought that there were like words that are very hard and sound kind of interesting, but probably are not good names. But it was the play between architecture and organization, and I was trying to make an org card, like a garden-like thing. Yeah. Arg was a word that was in my mind as well. Architecture could be a funny name, but maybe the organizational side is sort of yes, something like that. Like I'll be welcome to write them down if good candidates. We can put a subtitle there for named candidate. But yeah, like the description is just like describing kind of things that we have talked about. The main thing maybe to highlight is like how I see the pathway or the potential, which might prove to also towards other potential as well. But it's like, so you have this sort of like an engine to create, you have quite a lot of control on the topics or topic-like things, topics and themes, but it's not just let's put this theme, but it's this combination of like almost like a predicate structure, but not as rigid maybe, in the sense of like an agent. By the way, I polished it and named it agency because agency is kind of slightly more general term, and it could be a person agent, but it may be also emphasizes that it could be like an organizational sense of a unit or something like that. So that's That's a cosmetic change, I would mostly say. But you have this agent, and then there is this event, and also the adjectives have been polished with the name of quality, which I thought is they are qualities. So, and quality is more clear than making a hack word adject. So, if you think that's not good, we can always change them back or something different. But it's essentially now agencies, events, and qualities. Those things. But like that, you can combine this, like that there is an event which is colored by qualities, and then it's meant like pushed to be considered through a particular agency. And that's the kind of like more sophisticated than just having a thematic thing, but that becomes the kind of seed for a scene. But then in terms of this, towards this sort of architecture and playing of the scenes, my gut feeling is, or feeling is like, when you're playing the scenes, like the interesting thing is, it's not a worry that the scene is not like one-to-one, even towards the kind of directions that, let's say, you're organizationally interested in. But that can be good, but it's not necessary. But the key thing is that if something interesting emerges, like an interesting direction of practice, interesting moment, interesting approach, whatever it is, that's kind of what it's generating. And then these relations, which you can create by proposing these entrances and exits to scenes, which is essentially relations to other already played scenes or potential scenes to be played in the future, is a way to create like towards a graph-like structure. So in a way, like you could think of it almost like organization by issues. So it's not necessarily going towards the normal, like, oh, we have this department, and then they send these documents to these. These kind of things are useful, but this is more like, oh, here's an interesting practice. This is another kind of direction where a related practice could form, but you're looking at like almost like these knot points or interesting processes. It's more processes than, noun-like things that it might be finding, or be good at finding. Like you can, of course, have noun-like things. And towards that end, just to highlight, so when the scenes are being played, I'll scroll down. This is more or less how we played, but this is more detailed or kind of written out. Like once the one player has kind of started the scene, the first description, all the players can do the following moves. These don't meant to be super constraining, but just to give like ways to think about it. And one of them is the shift, which is like essentially like somebody described a scene, and if you're kind of like pressing the play button further, like the scene is moving onwards, like something is happening, you say, this is what happens in the next moment, that's a shift. But that's separated from add because it makes you think differently. Like if you add a new element, like a new person or a new thing that's happening there, like a presence of an object, whatever, that's an add. And one doesn't have to worry about that. My thing is kind of a shift and an add. It's not a problem, just play it. But it's more like that you can think that there is a difference in shifting and adding. Exclude is something I'm not sure about, but it might be useful. Usually in playtest you have more than less to. But the exclude is this sort of like, hey, I would like that we kind of don't emphasize too much or put to the side this and this area of the topic or in the scene, or don't bring in this, which is then somebody can counter argue, and that should be discussed and come to some kind of an agreement. Like I can say that the exclude things are actually sometimes very useful. because it's a kind of doorway that people sometimes need to say out, like, hey, I wouldn't, like, I'm worried that there's this maybe a direction that is not fertile, I think, and could we put it aside and discuss that? So not everything is editing. Okay, that's exclude. Question is kind of a move that we already did in the last time, which is you pose a question on the scene, and then the rule is anybody but the questioner may answer it. And questions, of course, have a different nature than shifting or adding. That's why. Then there's the insert entrance and exit, and this is kind of the same, but there's a lot of text on there, mostly because there's different things you could do there. But the idea is like when you create an entrance and exit, you simply like say this scene could lead or connect to this other scene, and if that scene has not been played, simply giving it the title and a short description of what you're thinking is fine. We should not jump to the new scene immediately, but just it's almost like a placeholder in this scene. And nothing like forces that that scene has to be played next, but it's like what you're creating, its source of inspiration is like, let's think about this kind of a connection. Which then could become a source of play later. And then, like said last time, you can shortly describe the nature of relation you're thinking. Because if you're thinking that leads to something, you're already thinking of some kind of a relation. And then optionally, you can, if you think like there's actually something that like an effort to get to that scene, or there's an input or output going between them, optionally you can describe those. But it's kind of the same thing the last time. But the one thing I wanted to just go through is this token, which was sort of present, but we never really got to last time. And I simplified it, actually. So there's now just one token. But the key thing is, like, whenever you notice something interesting and valuable to you in the scene or that is being played, something that you think deserves further thinking process, deserves to be notified, and that's when you place a token. And how do you place a token? You define where you place it. Like you cannot just define something completely new, but you can kind of frame it into your liking. It's like, hey, this kind of like, let's say the method or the ritual at the end of an end of the day last time, you could say like, I actually want to put a token on this, and I find interesting in it this and this and this. And this is almost like a different take on this saving we've been talking about, like, but it's also like putting like something that has a higher level of persistence out of these scenes, like something that stays, like, and and you can kind of describe what could be done with it. Like, for example, hey, this method could be used for that I'm putting the token on could be used for this and that kind of thing. It could develop further in this and this manner, and if it would be used, these kind of things could come out of it. They're like potential goals that could be outlined. So so that's like the role of the token, and somebody else can stack a token. So if somebody has played a token somewhere, and somebody could say, I put the token on the same thing to increase its kind of like value. It's not some super exact thing, but it's kind of like in a way raising its social notification. And when they put that, they can also add their own comments on why it's valuable. So that kind of like puts these moves, the shift, moving things along, adding a detail, exclude, like, hey, what if we don't go there, question, and then opening an entrance or exit, or then this issuing a token to a place, or issuing and framing the thing you're placing the token on. And finally, like to end a scene, there is like anybody can propose that, and then it's if there is a kind of general agreement that we end it, then it's ended. If it's not ended, what should be discussed is what do we still want out of it, to kind of give a little bit of a sense for that. And there is a structure we don't have to use, but it's a possibility. I thought that there could be this sort of a host player that like for every scene the host changes, but the host has this sort of like a final say in some choices that they then when the host can choose the event from our list, and other players can choose the quality for that event that the host has chosen, and the and then host can choose to which agency to place it. So in a way, like it's giving a certain player more power, but then the next turn, next scene, it's some other player. But it can also make the decisions easier. And host also in this structure makes the initial description for the scene. And the idea here is like, because the host is kind of making a little bit more on the kind of placements of combinations of the event quality and agency, they probably have an idea. So they start the first description, but after that, it's equal. Like all these moves are everybody. But like I said, if we don't play too many scenes, we can kind of like do these things together. We don't have to necessarily use the whole structure here. It's more like a possibility. And that's about it. Like I could talk a little bit about like potential of roles, which is currently in the leftovers, but maybe that's not necessary for now. But any comments, questions?
Just as a mental image, we're still kind of employing this illustration of the dungeon. So if we think of scenes, we think of kind of building this type of arena or dungeon so that they adjace in one way or the other. So we're not, what I'm saying is like, we're not just throwing a scene out there and then we stop that and we throw another scene, but somehow we would consider them to form some connection that is like a lasting connection.
Yeah, like I think it can be like you could equally think of a graph. Like in a way, like the scene is a replacement for a room. The limitations of the scene, which are kind of soft but still some kind of limitations, are also I was reading the comments a lot. Yeah, like we don't have to think about this in this sort of that somehow the kind of a real room-like place is our yeah, and really, like for example, how the entrance exit works, it's actually closer to kind of graph-like thing. It's more like how could these things, existing things or a potential new thing, how could they be related? Which is really like just putting a connection, but then giving this sort of description for the connection in itself. So it's encouraging you to think about the connections. I think the connections come more and more in play once you play more scenes. But and kind of how they look, how are they organized, is something that I think could be become, once you played several scenes and you have several tokens, which is like, these were the, I think, for the players, the important nuggets to find. Maybe those nuggets are actually the thing you're organizing. Like, this is what I mean by that. It could be this sort of almost like map of interesting processes. and then you can think like, okay, these have some connections. How do we draw this out? But you have already some idea towards that by having these connections and so on. And to your just a short to your point, like when the token is recorded, is it saved? Like we're currently like in this experimental saving, like we did earlier, that everybody has the right to write. And by the way, Dustin, if you don't have, I can try to put if you have a Gmail address. I think everybody else has the right to write. But so if you put a token, I think let's put self-responsibility that you put something down, like for it. But yeah, that's the idea, that certainly something could be like written down from.
But it's not an equation. So like first we can have writing down without placing tokens, and we might also place tokens without writing them down. My question was, is that something that you would conceive as an automatic like relationship that? But we didn't discuss it, and I think we can probably find out. I just wanted to say about the dungeon. The question that I was asking was more about the permanence of the different scenes onto one another, of their continuity of their coexistence. That was my question regarding the dungeon, not the kind of room-like structure, but the scene.
I think that is still in play or play storming, because there is a play storming quality to this, like the persistence of the scenes themselves. Like one of the reasons is to introduce the tokens is to put like a thing like, here's the thing I would like to hold, to create a kind of like almost like a more assured persistence. Because I think it's up. I think it will be discovered better to play whether you actually want to like store the scenes, or whether the scenes are actually generators, but it's actually the kind of nuggets you tokenize that are the more important thing. I'm not sure. I think that can be really found out only through playing around with it. Maybe it's worthwhile to think about saving something out about the scene, and then you could easily introduce mechanics towards that. Like whoever introduces the scene creates an introduction text, and people write some short summaries of what they've added and so on. Like that's a possibility, but we can see how important that is. Any other questions, comments? Okay.
It's just very quick one, like doesn't directly relate to what you said, but what is written down there in the kind of to-do things, and there is this like a mapping or maps or something like that you have wrote there. And just like when you were talking about this, like scenes and persistence and so on, like just like lately I've been thinking about kind of the roles of play areas, kind of where you play something, and I find it kind of fascinating to think that a play area, once you kind of declare that, okay, we have a play area where we kind of put these whether they are like seeds or something else, recordings, it's kind of it's always imaginary, and then you can also like make a version that is like yeah, okay, we outline this space from the table or something like that. And if you kind of declare play area, you can also like give qualities to play area, but I was just like thinking that it's quite close to something like, okay, if we have a kind of area or land or something like that, landscape that is constructed of scenes and their relations, then we are actually kind of what do we see around? Then we see a kind of we see scenery or so on. So I just find it funny that that you can you can kind of you can create saving when you kind of do something with kind of if you somehow like restrain that here we have some sort of like area where things are going to happen or something like that. Maybe.
Yeah, that there is. I think there's many kind of area-like qualities at play. Like some of them still to be kind of like maybe formulated, like the map parts and so on, like and how to go from these connections and relations to maps and put. But like I'm sure somebody has said it somewhere because it's obvious, and I'm sure that certain game designers understand this. But scene is kind of a play on area, like the whole concept of a scene, but an imaginary area, but not completely just free form. It's a kind of play with the sense that like building some kind of cohesion of what we think that belongs to the current situation in a way, and that is kind of like up to interpretation and discussion and coming into some kind of synchronicity, and there's some leeway in that synchronicity, but it's very much about this, like that there's certain things that belong, and in this way it's actually kind of related to the stage, the old art concept and the theater concept, which is very much like, but uh, like about like what's present, but of course harder because the stage is more tangible in quality. So that's already a kind of field area in itself. The scene is, but then like going to another scene, that's another area. Having connections, that's a kind of different way to play with area. If you add a map, you have like relation between areas. So it's really much playing with the structures that we have from such area-like, space-like, place-like, map-like things, but kind of approaching them with a little bit more interpretation, perhaps. So yeah, that's kind of like I agree that it's an interesting direction. The other things on the questions to do, if there's some questions on there, like we can approach them later, like some of them are just placeholders, like I think actually all of those should, the question marks, which is my idiomatic writing, I like to put question marks at the beginning for things that are things this is not sure kind of thing, and maybe it doesn't belong, but yeah, so but we could move from here, and of course the expressed wish was that we kind of play from what we've saved. Of course, we have leeway how much we include that, but let's. What do you think? Like we had this. Let's, for clearness, but now that these are agencies, these are qualities, but we have these lists. Would you be interested in starting from these, or would you like to employ our saves, so to speak, that are written here? Or not employ?
Last time I thought it would be interesting if we would replay the end of the day at the Maelstrom. Today I'm not so sure. Maybe we want to start somewhere else, but that might be interesting to just replay a different day at the that could be a thing we do.
Could be, yeah. What about others? And I'm sorry for my flaky, buggy camera.
Quick question. I think that was a quite good idea, but also would like to know, Pekko, what would you want to find out from the playtest?
I think one thing, I think it would be really interesting to replay, but it also would be interesting to try out a different scene, in the sense of getting a comparison point. Of course, it's a comparison point to play the same thing, but one way to play it, this is to play a different scene, but then say that somehow we can decide later how the end of the day at Malmstrom played last time is present, that it was a scene that exists or has happened, and that's and then for Dustin, of course, lacking that experience, I don't think it's a problem at all. We can. Okay, and also now, Pablo, your comment that let's do a new scene. I would be for a new scene, and for that, we could jump into the loop of selecting agent, selecting an event, putting qualities to it, and then playing it into an agency. And Dustin can also follow along. If somebody really wants to add an agency or event or quality, that's, I think, okay. But of course, selecting from the ones written earlier is a possibility. But anybody have some favorites that they would like to start or select, starting from the events?
Can I just ask about the category above the agencies, the themes? Do we, well, because they haven't now, if I was listening correctly, they haven't now really featured in this repetition of that you just gave.
Yeah, I mean, this is because the themes is maybe, so this was what we wrote out of the pre-game discussion. That's what the themes are. Maybe that's let's put that, it's clearer. So that's that. And in a way, they're this sort of free flow conversation where people can kind of a little bit put issues or interests on the table, but they're not playing pieces per se. So yeah, so unlike agencies, events, and qualities, which are almost like cards in a way. So yeah, any proposals for events? I have them on the screen also for that reason.
My vote would be on a new ingredient required in the process arrives. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Same here.
Okay, that's sounds to me, unless there is other strong candidates, that's already. Let's actually do like this, that this has been played, and then this would mean that this is, or let's do it even more smartly, at least in some sense, here's one, and here's two, with some order, and
candidate for 3, but not 2.
Candidate for 3?
Yeah, not for this time, but maybe some other time. But
okay,
yeah, because you marked 1 and 2. I definitely vote for that new ingredient, but at the same time, I'm just thinking that at some point this everyday discussion, if we don't know anything about the organization, there might be some like generative potential to go kind of into any direction and find out. But I vote for the same as Pablo and Martin.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good candidate because, like you said, it might kind of actually reveal things in an interesting fashion. So I marked it. Like now it's 3 in brackets, so that makes it a candidate for. Um, um, and I think the qualities are something that is maybe easier to reuse because they're really kind of coloring. But if we have now a new ingredient required in the process or in a process, maybe to clarify, what qualities you would like to play, like that would make it like a mind-bending new ingredient or exemplary new ingredient, or and also new qualities can be put into their.
I'm trying to make animated animation.
Engulfing, shadowy, that's
and the radiating, I find interesting.
And radiating. Okay, engulfing,
as
shadowy,
candidates.
Yeah, engulfing, shadowy, radiating. I think Pablo is proposing radiating as well.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like radiating could also kind of as an attribute to it kind of be resonating or something like that. But radiating sounds good.
Yeah, there is a read on radiating, which is not literal like radiation, but it's like this sort of like almost like the sun. Like so, I think one can play with that. It doesn't have to be like, oh, it's radiation. So that kind of would bring in the direction Mikael is thinking, and I kind of agree. It's good to keep this sort of like room in that. Okay, but let's, in order to go forward, let's put radiating, and then so yeah, these were the selected agencies. And Maelstrom was played first. So yeah, while you're thinking candidates, I can say to Dustin, so with these were, well, agents is a good word, but really thinking of this sort of almost factors, forces, which can be like, you know, a unit in an organization, a certain kind of like even a movement like thing, like thing that doesn't necessarily have a concrete mind, but yeah, like just like a movement seems to have a mind of its own. That's the kind of quality of these agencies. Of course, they can be also more concrete. They can be this unit or this department or even this person. That's a completely possible way of creating an agency as well.
That could maybe be nice just to add to the list more as a memory for the future, but you know, to kind of stake out the scope of what can be just write
Which
more,
one?
just for kind of future reference, like write a bit more kind of everyday type of agent in there, whether we want to use them or not, but just to kind of, you know, as a safe state from what you just said.
Yeah. If anybody has such a thing in mind, or it could be added, I don't think it's a problem. But I think somebody was proposing triangulation by the highlight. Yeah, like for example, Martin was somebody else. Anomaly mining.
I tried the anomaly mining or triangulation, whatever gets the most votes.
What about others? Anomaly mining, triangulation.
Yeah, I would go for those two as well.
Same here. No preference.
Wow.
We could play, like in the structure there's something that, well, we don't have to use, but that there's this idea that like you can kind of introduce like almost like sub agencies, is that if the host selects like this goes to this agency, some player might select that, but I will also think about this agency. I wouldn't, maybe we don't have to play that structure now. It's more for maybe later. But what we could do is essentially pick that somehow anomaly mining and triangulation are present and see which ones becomes more interesting in the combination. But okay, is that okay? Like, I'll just copy the earlier ones. Like, so are you okay with that? I'm picking the two.
Yes.
You have to, yeah, say a lot because doing this saving at the same time. So
Maybe this is a meta question, but I'm right now thinking how they come together. For example, if we're adding the quality to the event, is it a new radiating element required in the process, or is it a new element required in the radiating process? And maybe there's a token we want to put into one of those.
I think like we can decide the kind of where the radiating is present, and then the token placing. I think that can come when like we find it's always like, oh, there was something interesting happening in the generation that we were doing. Like maybe, yeah, one could play that, but like one could wait for it, because you can even place a token to that, but maybe after we've done some. But okay, so if we have road radiation, so we have this the radiating new ingredient or new ingredient required in a radiating process, etc. Possibilities, and things to concern is the kind of triangulation, which had like people maybe remember how it was described, and then anomaly mining, like looking towards anomalies. Who would like to kind of start by describing like a moment in this, the slice of life, just a kind of starting moment of what's happening in like where, what, how is this, like around this event of a new ingredient, possibly completely new. And you can emphasize triangulation or anomaly mining, whichever.
I would like to say we're in a makeshift laboratory, and the doorbell rings, and we know we have to go pick up the whatever has arrived. That's as far as I will go.
Yeah, I'll just to encourage writing. I'll write something, even though I'm bad at writing and talking at the same time. But to also this kind of little bit illustrate the moves, I could play the next one, and I'll do a shift. So the scene moves like the door is opened. This is a door that is towards anomaly mining, or at least some persons. It doesn't have to be that they have a room, but somehow it leads to it because maybe not every new ingredient, but new ingredients are first go through a process of looking for anomalies, not only negatively, but also positively, in terms of the possibilities. And there is a process towards this. Let's write something about this. And anybody jump in.
I would like to add that the usual anomaly miner had a work accident, so I'm substituting today. So I will be doing the anomaly mining, but it's, yeah, let's see how it goes. It's my first time.
All right. This is also as a metaphor.
Is it a shift or an add?
No, it doesn't really matter. It's just,
okay.
like it's okay. Like in a way, you can, like I said, like the shift and add actually kind of melt together. I also did kind of adds on it, but it's more like you can think like I'm emphasizing add. I'm like now I want to bring a new player arrives to the stage, or now I want to see like what happens when the knife is plunged, whatever it is. Like but it also like a meta comment. This is kind of one way I'm thinking about roles, like also slotting oneself to it, which I think is interesting, but it's nice that you're playing with that. Okay, so.
And another meta comment, because I am inferring the existence of a usual anomaly miner. Yeah. So that's like suddenly like an open role in a way that someone might take. I don't know. Maybe this is becoming too much of a movie in my head.
That's okay. It's all data that supports your generation. I would pose a question. What is the process, or what is, or like the sense of like at least how the process has been communicated to you, but what is the process of mining anomalies? You don't have to describe it fully, but what comes to your mind? And that's, of course, that question is for anybody to answer.
Yeah, I just got here, so I'm not really sure. Please let me know.
Anybody else?
Well, I will say what was also going to be my kind of next move, some sort of like addition. I don't actually have answer to your question kind of directly, but indirectly, something else as well arrives with the ingredient. These are the notes made by anomaly mining regarding this ingredient, and you notice that that they're kind of clear, but at the same time they are very fragmentary, very fragmentary, and it's hard to understand kind of how do these different fragments relate to each other. And from the perspective of laboratory worker, just like makeshift laboratory worker who is there for the first day or something like that, you may have to develop a some sort of like strategy for both how to approach the ingredient and how to approach these nodes in order to find out if there is any relevance for you, something like that.
That is interesting. I'm doing too many moves at the beginning. I'll promise I'll shut up, but I have a thing that I find interesting, and I'm already thinking of slotting a token, but let's see about that. But I'll make this is kind of an ad, I would say, and that is like these fragments of anomaly mining are all patterns, descriptions of patterns. Like they can be almost anything, like what kind of patterns you see in a text, what kind of patterns you see in a particular material, like fabric, or and notes about these patterns. And of course, the mining of anomalies is comparing those patterns and seeing what deviates or what's different from the usual. And the patterns are, of course, not exhaustive, even for one thing, and then they are kind of fragmented. But this is also to note that like there is no like a full way of like doing exhaustive patterns for things. But they are sort of modular at the same time. Like they are fragments, but they are like, oh, this is mostly about, say, text.
One question, I'm sorry to interrupt. One question, it is not my turn, but may I slot a token?
Yes, like it's like anybody who takes a turn. It's like first come, first serve kind of thing. Like
yes, I from the perspective of anomaly mining, I find that there is really some information to be found here and some understanding, and kind of interestingly also this is going back to like maelstrom as kind of defined by Marshall McLuhan. It's like by observing these patterns and the of the whirlpool, the protagonist could actually find a way to escape this whirlpool. Otherwise, it would have been impossible. And the same way, kind of what McLuhan kind of means that kind of if you are, let's say, a fish living in the water, kind of observing patterns maybe, or getting stranded, of course, but observing patterns may be the only way to observe this medium you are kind of trying to observe if you don't want to go on beach yourself and die, kind of, or something like that.
Yeah, like I made a category for tokens, like trying out the saving in different ways. So you could write down that like a summary, like a token placed, and then put that like a summary of that description into that, you know, to kind of highlight the tokens.
I had a thought earlier, a couple of steps back, but maybe I say it anyway, about the setup of the makeshift laboratory and the definition of the fact that the ingredients arrives to the anomaly mining. There's no walls in the laboratory.
No walls.
No. And so I think that part of the task of the anomaly miner is also kind of to understand why his department is anomaly mining, or like how, like the definition of that.
Ah, that's interesting. I'm saving for you. I'm trying, like you can change it certainly, but like I think it's useful. Somebody's talking that you can serve. But that's so it could be arriving to Pablo's door. That's not a question. That was maybe a meta comment, but just to say, yeah, not a move.
Yeah, and there is a sorting system at hand, but it carries no labels.
Mm. Okay.
I'm thinking since there's no walls, but there's a door, probably the only purpose of the door is to announce the arrival of ingredients. So maybe we can define this door in a better way.
Maybe it's a door in quotation marks. Like it's like what it's an interface.
Mm.
This was also maybe one should almost like give this freedom of making short additions or proposals. Anyway, like
So were you saying that, or this is kind of I'm taking a turn here as well, but so is it so that the kind of one very important role for anomaly mining is actually to be able to create this temporary spaces called laboratories, or kind of like framing them out of the organization?
Framing them out.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean by that? This is not also not a move, but kind of like, can you flesh that out?
Kind of could it be so that kind of there is something interesting kind of already happening. Something interesting has already happened in the space where we now have the laboratory, even before the laboratory was there. So why Pablo is a new worker in the laboratory is just because he's been working probably there maybe for a long time, but just now he became a laboratory worker because anomaly mining decided to establish a laboratory by sending this ingredient to Pablo and others.
I saved by writing my style of saving, discovering emergent laboratories from potential places. And I will place a token almost to a quote. I'll just play with this formalism to find it. I take what Martin said, how the place they are in is a department, and by that, like, I mean, there's like this is a quality that as an organizational quality that actually this seems to be. I'm not forcing anybody to this, but I'm suggesting, like that there is this quality of quality of that it's an organization kind of that discovers itself from places, maybe even people, and kind of organizes itself from like in this emergent fashion. And maybe that's not the only quality, but yeah, that's what I'm putting a token in, like what is kind of present in Martin's idea. And as a meta comment, this is kind of showing, maybe it's, I don't know if it's visible to you or like, but there's that there comes this sort of interesting things, and I have this hunch that this tokenizing is a way to kind of like wrap a nugget that this is an interesting quality, and that's kind of what they're seeking to do. Anyway, yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I'm a bit afraid that this would be one of the questions that would lead to a possible dead end, because I'm a bit asking for a definition of something.
Mm-hmm. But just say it. It's like,
yeah. So my question is about the ingredient that arrives, and it's a Pablo, I think you wrote, the arrival of the ingredient triggers the existence of the laboratory, right?
I was trying to translate what Mikael said, but maybe I was not very good at it.
Yeah. I think I will just actually leave it at that and just see to the next.
Say again, like, because I was just writing, I lost the keywords. What was the question exactly?
Oh, I was kind of triggered by what Pablo wrote there. The arrival of the ingredient triggers the existence of the laboratory, and I wanted to kind of rephrase that, but I think I will refrain from that and will just wait out now.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting. Yeah, of course, anybody could answer that.
I think Mikael actually said asks for the laboratory to be assembled. I think ask was the word, but I'm not sure. But that's better than trigger. I guess trigger is a bit, yeah, it creates a specific image. So maybe that should be rephrased.
I think now maybe I should say what I was saying. My question would have been like along the lines of this point, asks, or like whether the kind of ingredient that arrives is a bit of a kind of how to say, like a tester. But then I thought that became maybe a bit too binary right now in this situation, and so that's why I retreated from asking that.
Just a kind of continuation to that. I'm just thinking on top of these kind of candy ingredient at this point, until we know more, be thought of as so it's a possible agent, kind of creating both like agency and change. It's kind of definitely what it does is now that it has arrived, it has created already some sort of like action and kind of and also like new structures, kind of probably temporary structures inside the organization. And we are like involved somehow in this, and I understand that kind of at least we began with the assumption that the most important thing is to find out kind of some sort of like interesting elements and use cases of this, like of this ingredient, but it is starting to turn out that one interesting use case for this ingredient is actually what is happening right now. We are kind of organizing around it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll play an ad, which is kind of riffing from what you both were saying, Martin and Mikael. And because it's not tokenized, it can kind of go away in a, like it doesn't have to become a big thing, but I'm kind of semi-courageously taking what you said, Martin, and making it a thing. The organization is developed or grown by asks. I like the word asks because it's an offer, yes, but I like that like it's an interesting thing to play. That is, somebody sends and asks, can you detect anomalies in this ingredient? And that kind of sets up the situation that for that moment, that person is an anomaly miner. Doesn't mean that that's the first moment they are, but for that moment, and what they produce is, like if they answer that ask, the output of like, I found this and this. And then at the same time, they are kind of asked, at least latently, to think about the place they are in as a laboratory. Like I happen to be at home, or maybe the person knew I was at home, and by that I found these instruments or the notes I've been making are actually quite useful for this. And like, and then I make notes that for my laboratory now, I put these notes here, and the laboratory develops. And that is like an interesting direction. So I throw it in, but the tokens actually provide this, like some things can be slightly more hypothetical because they're not yet tokens. So that's my add.
Can one ask like a pondering question, kind of throw
Sure.
one out? May it be so that what the ingredient asks is the question, is this an anomaly?
Could be. Anybody else answers? I've talked enough.
That would be a very difficult first day as an anomaly miner, I would say.
Well, it's certainly an extraordinary day, so I guess that's an easy answer.
Wow, true. Yeah, but that's an interesting thing. Maybe all ingredients do that.
I mean, if one tunes the question is like, do you perceive this as an anomaly? If so, how? Like, is kind of the same question, but with a kind of more personal touch.
I like the question, and I have a counter question. Previously, we said that we're looking for deviations, we're looking for anomalies, and that there's a comparison to what's usual. What is this? What is the usual? Where is it coming from? How is it created? Or, yeah, that's my question.
I have to throw in because I have one good move. The anomaly miner can be thought of as a dyadic structure, that they're looking for anomalies, but to find anomalies, they also develop patterns. That is, they define the normal or the pattern that they find. Like maybe pattern is a better word than normal. That in a way, like they of course might have existing patterns from themselves or from others, but they like really finding the anomaly might be actually more about them writing about the pattern, and the result is really the pattern.
Can I jump in on this?
Mm-hmm.
Is maybe if the anomaly, or that like the anomaly miner would be more like the act of, you know, sticking something, like marking something to be the anomaly in order to perceive how a pre-existing whatever would flip into a role of being normal. I'm not sure that sentence made a lot of sense. Like what I'm trying to say is, I will think about it and I will try to rephrase.
Can I kind of ask a question that is a continuation to Pablo's question?
Mm-hmm.
Do you perceive this as an anomaly? kind of or to push the play button, kind of this may be something that this would be something that while we try to figure out what is our state and what should we do next, we also come up with the idea kind of that extends from the ingredient that okay, it may be possible that we cannot find out if this or if this ingredient doesn't turn out to be a anomaly in itself, in its kind of isolated form. Is it possible that we can become an anomaly to this ingredient? How should we do it? How should we change in order to become an anomaly to this ingredient, so that this ingredient becomes an actual anomaly? And is this desirable?
That's an interesting one. So this is not a move, but or not an answer, but a question for clarity. So you mean like when you are an anomaly to it, or you see yourself as an anomaly to it, then it becomes anomaly to you. Like you're thinking about changing yourself in order to see this anomaly.
Yes, or if we change our processes so that kind of this ingredient starts to appear more anomaly-like, or something like that. So I'm just like extending the kind of focus from the ingredient also to our other processes that we were doing before we became a laboratory or something like that.
I have two things. The first of which I just forgot. Yes, the first of which being, when are we kind of done building the scene, and when are we starting to play the scene? And Pekko, in which state do you think we are right now?
So a meta question. So I'll answer.
It's a meta question.
Yeah, but that's fine. Like so. Those like playing the scenes rules are not there, but I've been thinking about it. Like it could be just a move, like in a way, like how the shift and add is to propose to play, like which would be kind of jump in, and of course that would be possible. We have kind of done these kind of things earlier. Like I didn't write it yet down, mostly because the last time we were more several times in the kind of more play mode. This kind of like jumping in mode. So I was like, let's start from kind of this high up view to have a kind of difference, but like it would be totally possible here. But like just to finish that, you could play this scene just in the construction mode and end it there. That's a possibility, and that was kind of interesting to think about. Not to say that the play is bad, but it's just like a very different take on the scene, and so that's why kind of putting the emphasis on the construction side here. But the ending of the scene, like in the rules, is like anybody can propose and like that we should. I think we should end the scene, and then people can say
the construction of the scene.
Yeah, construction or whatever, like the scene kind of closes, and then anybody else can say yes, or they can say no, but and then list the things that they still want to like process with the scene, and so not just no, but to say like I would still like to visit this, or I still have one move, and so.
Can you during the play, can you propose kind of condition or a trigger or a possible like way to end the scene when ever we will do it, but kind of can I propose how this scene might end before we reach this end?
I think definitely you could, and we could test it. I mean, it's not in the structure, but we could test such a thing. It's an interesting possibility. Like some games have this, like that the scene starts with a question, and whenever somebody kind of provides an answer to the question, it's the end of the scene. I think it's a possibility, certainly. Like you could propose such, if you want.
Yeah, and this is really, this is just like I'm just like proposing one like alternative way to end the scene in some distant future, and this kind of when thinking about this kind of how should the kind of this sort of like organizing happen or so on. So one possible way to end the scene would be when we decide to send this ingredient to another scene or a department or something like that.
Yeah, like that could be interesting. Like we could have that as a possibility. Like people don't have to follow it, but you know, it's like I said, proposal for people. So somebody could propose an end, like saying like is this the transfer? But I have one move. I will add a token to an existing place. I will at the same time play with this kind of formalization of it, and this is probably not the best way to write this, but I'm placing another token on this. How the place they're in is a department area.
Okay, I was going out.
And as per the rules, I'm adding to it.
Okay.
And what I'm adding is a potential effort is structures of emergent organizations. And what I mean by this is like there is an idea here, which I haven't really seen, is a whole style or subgenre or genre of organizations, which is emergent organizing. But it's not not in the style of, you know, like, oh, we have to do this, so you go do this and you go do that. But, you know, like precisely this, that there is this organization that exists, and it's like it actually kind of defines itself, like when somebody says and sends an ask to somebody that can you anomaly mine this, and you become the anomaly miner, and then you record your patterns and those become part of the organization. And actually there is a potentially a whole genre of organization hidden there. So that's my token to put to this. Like now there's two, it's a second token on the same topic, but with the addition that there is a potential interesting effort of actually kind of outlining that, the genre and structures of these kind of emergent organizational principles or organizations.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So knowing that this is going to go on YouTube, I expect and kind of almost ask to be slaughtered by those who will listen to this later. But there's one thing, because I'm like completely not versed in the reading of the reference that I want to bring up now. But it's a thing that I came across by way of one of the residents who were with us last year, which is the writings, as far as I understand them, of Gilbert Simondon. Do you know? Does anybody know him?
Yes.
Okay, and so then you can already kind of pick up the mess that I'm going to make now. But what I think is, in what you just said, the emergent organizations, what I think is really interesting is, or would be to me, and I think I want to put a token, stack it on top of your token there.
Yeah.
One thing that stuck with me when the beautiful Maxim Spivakov told me about Simondon was that he, speaking about the theory of alienation, or like the thoughts on alienation that Simondon expresses, is that if we speak about the relationship between humans and technical objects, which is the topic that I speak about, is that this alienation occurs the moment when we affix a given purpose to an apparatus. That is the moment when we begin feeling alienated from that technical object. And so as long as we do not do that, as long as we keep kind of seeing any apparatus with in the light of it being an evolutionary, kind of emergence in a sense, we do not, and we kind of cooperate with it, or interact with it in that on that idea, or in that idea, then we do not experience alienation from that machine or whatever it is. And I just want to, like, on putting that on an organization, I think is highly interesting. Also to say that, because we also have to kind of remember that this ingredient arrived from someplace. It was given to us, to this organization, from somewhere. And in response to that, we have been asked, is this an anomaly, or do we perceive this as an anomaly? And we suddenly find out, as Mikhail pointed out, that the process might be the process that we're going through right here. And I think so. Like, I'm not sure where to tie up this talk, but I tokenize as much as you do this emergent organization.
Yeah, I added your some synopsis from your comments, like, to add to them, but to the token, like, I'm using this sort of like a draft of how to do like the stack tokens by making them as sub bullet points. Like, now there's 3, but then the other 2 are sub bullet points. There's maybe a better way, but I think it can serve for now. But yes, yours is the last line in that 3 token thing. Like, you can add to that. I have a move, but like, I've done enough. Like, somebody else, go ahead.
Go for it, I think.
Okay. The anomaly miner, which is Pablo, in this weird way, which I like, that it's a really interesting, is also concerned. My miner is also concerned with the department of cohesion or resonance mining. Let's call it resonance mining. There is also considering the potential inputs from, this is definitely an ad, from the unit. Department's too large, so I'll just say unit to keep it a little bit uncertain, of resonance mining. And the resonance mining, of course, is not on our agencies, but in a way, like, this is a kind of a valid move. It could be, but like, it became for me just interesting that actually we're really tapping into interesting directions, like the emergence, but also this sort of mining as this sort of discovery process. But then it immediately came to me that there has to be other styles of mining, And the first thing is kind of not opposite, but sort of like a different direction, which is finding harmonies, cohesion, resistance. And that's my thought on resonance mining.
I have a question for that, because if I imagine the comparison process of perceiving deviation, there's like a overlapping visually in my head where two things overlap, and the space that they do not share is the anomaly, and the space that they do share is the resonance. But you can keep both. So maybe these are departments that work together, but their techniques are different because they look for different things. Or is the object destroyed and you can only do one or the other? Because mining has also a lot of destruction in it, if we're using the word mining. Yeah, how destructive is this process? And if the resonance, you have to choose between resonance or anomaly, or if both are conserved.
I actually kind of play in connection with your move, an entrance exit. Maybe they should be called ports or something to not have two words. Entrance exit is resonance mining. Unit, and I think actually you described some things about this relation really well already, like but I think it's a relation. I keep it actually kind of open, not to, but I say the relation is a dialogue, and intentionally leave it at that. Like not to define it, but just say it's a dialogue. I'll add one more, almost a conversation. But I leave it at that, like to give this sort of like a potentially interesting sense to it. And then like I think I think that's enough. Like in a way, like one could add some nature to the resonance mining unit, but like this is a potential entrance exit, and then the relation and the inputs and outputs are something like a dialogue.
Pekka, may I? You were, sorry, now I have a complication on my arm here. You were speaking about the relationship between these two departments, right? Were you?
Yeah.
May I suggest that they stand in strong antagonism to one another?
Sure.
Because I think that could be an interesting kind of property in an organization, that you kind of intentionally integrate, like, you know, ambitiously integrate departments whose purpose is to stand in strong antagony to one another.
Okay, I'll add your but can I suggest a modification to that, like that they stand in it's another relation, stand in an intentionally antagonistic relation. And what I mean by that, that it's kept to be antagonistic intentionally.
Yes, they're installed to be that way. Yes.
Yeah.
I think I would also try to clarify some structures. Okay, so what we got was an item and nodes, and so one interesting question is, once we are done, do we consume those items and nodes, Do we send them back or do we send them further? And I would like to suggest that we will, in a way, either consume or store those what we got. So we somehow use them in order to somehow create the space or something like that. Or actually we kind of translate or something like that, but we would have to create create a new item and new nodes based on our own needs. So we are not just like executing someone else's like wishes or generative seeds, but we are also like creating our own based on what we got from the anomaly mining and also based on our own generation or seeds or something like that. I cannot like formulate it, but was thinking of this sort of like process.
That would be interesting to formulate. I wrote your question or a version of it to save it, but you could, if you can't, like formulate something, because that's an interesting direction. Because this is more practical in the interest of time, but I would propose like an end of a scene, more to have some time to a little bit summarize what we have done and what would be the potential continuation, and some of the structures maybe that could be added or might be useful for the game structure. If you're okay with that, to have this time for a short summary. And like
let's do that, yes.
Yeah, like one thing from the, like, taking just from the top, and like this puts an interesting idea for the saving. I opened this as more like a question, but some ideas already towards it. Like it's not anymore a move, I'm talking now meta, but is that for me it kind of seems to go into the direction what I was thinking, is that the scene playing is really a generative engine. Then it's the things that come from alongside generation, which the tokens are partly doing at least, that are the things to really save. So one area to think about as a potential play is like making rules for saving, that the saving also, I mean, the tokens are doing something, but maybe it's like you don't necessarily just write exactly what happens because you might not need it, but you might kind of write about like things that were interesting to capture even more generally, even beyond the tokens from the seed. Because I think there was a lot here beyond the tokens as well, like, and it would be, and that creates like potentially, if there are kind of good simple mechanics for it, an interesting way to almost revisit the crystallized version of the scene. But now it would be much more like, oh, actually now we found out what is interesting about this process. And yes, the tokens help, but maybe there's also something else that people have wrote about that. I think this is quality that is really interesting in this scene, and that becomes the source for the new scene. A little bit like still drafty thought, but maybe that is clear enough. What do you think? If it wasn't clear enough, just ask.
I have just stuff to add. I think it was really clear, and I agree. I feel a bit the same about how this has gone. I just wanted to add that, like, from here forward, if we're already at that point, I'd be really kind of excited to see what happens as we, so to speak, go further into the dungeon, and also to the kind of, because I think I'm really excited about the idea of this mega dungeon, like for several reasons. Kind of this, what really triggers me there is this kind of relationship between kind of knowing and unknowing, like that we're both trying to be really precise and in what we're another subscriber here, what we're trying to find out, and then the idea of like not knowing of any border to that, or like maybe forgetting things along the way, and then kind of going, harking backward and thinking like, where were we earlier, and then like seeing this kind of graph, or the kind of the description that we've accumulated or achieved over that time. I think that's for me a really, really interesting outlook.
Yeah, I, by the way, agree. I'd actually kind of add like a meta comments, just crystallized saving. That's super quick from mine, and then playing towards mega dungeons. But anybody else, just I think these are good comments to save as well. So I'm just doing that. And yeah, do say.
Oh yeah, yes. This is just something that rose from what you were talking about. I'm just thinking about the kind of nature of entrances and exits compared to this item that just like made an entrance here, and I'm just like thinking that could somehow the good one kind of characteristics of certain type of entrance be actually in a form of a kind of this sort of like item. I mean that when you make an entrance, you also ask for something or something like that.
Can you explain further? Like, it's an interesting thought. Like,
yeah, I'm just like thinking that now if because I can almost see that when we got this like delivery from anomaly mining, I can almost start to imagine what sort of scene was happening there that led to this event where they kind of decided to create a new scene that we were playing, and kind of as if the scene, our scene, was created so that actually not so that okay, we want to create a new scene that is this our department becoming an anomaly mining laboratory or something like that, but actually they decided kind of to send this item and then it appeared to us. Or I mean that that kind of they anomaly mining made an offer for this scene that we played to be created.
Okay, yes, that's true. Like in a way, it's making an offer for, say, the resonance mining and potentially others. And if you would like, I would add that to maybe to the entrance exit also, like because it's kind of like where it's happening, like in a way, like the input and output could be asked, like that because the resonance mining hasn't been defined, but if there is an ask, it's kind of like an open definition. It's like it's a proposed definition, like it's putting like an ask to that, and maybe it kind of supports that, maybe it doesn't, but that's like up to that scene, maybe, or another scene, maybe where resonance binding plays to respond to that or not. Like, yeah. Yeah, like I was reason I stopped sharing screen. I wanted to put background, and I was kind of failing because I didn't find my Mega Dungeon magazines, but I found second best copy, which is like taking the sample file. But I have somewhere the full magazines. I just don't know where. But Mega Dungeon zine is this super small press, whatever. But it actually has a couple of interesting essays relating to what Martin was saying. I can maybe dig those out because you don't have to go through them all. But it's very much in the school of how to play with an infinite space, like a space that's not defined. And it, like a couple of those essays in the weirdness are interesting towards this quality. But yeah, like but like at the same time, yeah, maybe I can try to extract those essays. But let's put that, what you, Mikael, said, ask as put in, and I mean it could be somewhere else as well, but I'm just writing that down as the and you also said like as like formed out of the play process. Something I'm like, do change this if you think I'm putting things wrong, but I'm just like putting things that I remember in short form. But like then, like just generally, or Pablo, do you want like do you have a general comment from your?
Not a general comment, but I just
whatever you want.
Yeah, went through a sort of like developed a situation in my head after what Mikael said. I sort of like imagined the item to have some form of agency that is asking, offering, making offers to the players. How can we grant that agency to the object? So maybe the item is in a way a character, or we play the object, or we do as well leave space for the object to make decisions, the item that arrives. And I think that could be interesting in the context of the two opposing departments. If the item is controlled by people from the opposing departments, and whenever one makes a move or the object makes a move, it affects both departments in distinct ways. Yeah, I don't know. I just went through that idea in my head and wanted to put it out.
It's a really cool idea. I like it. Like, I mean, do add to it. I just added the kind of like not to it, like how to kind of like, yeah, how to have this sort of item point of view, like,
yeah.
And as general as time is ticking, but I want to say like yes, it's very much in kind of play storming. It's a kind of a state I like, that like, you know, like certain things that are more defined are also something that I think is interesting, and that the things that are not yet defined is like, well, I don't know what would be a good way to do it, and so in this sense, like there is a lot of the question marks are really about like, let's define them through play kind of thing. But I would say, like, with that caveat, that like what's really happening here is the particular topic, yes, as a kind of like engine of organizational discovery, I guess, also. The but it's also a kind of a conceptual differential engine. Actually, hi, we're just finishing.
No
like
problem. Hi.
Yeah, like it's like you're putting yourself in a very unusual, unconventional constellations in a way. Like you're not just I have one concept or I have two concepts on a list, but I have like ideas in a constellation, in a relation, which is kind of provided by the game system, and that makes you find these weird middle grounds, and they're weird because they are not conventional. Like an emergent, this kind of an emergent organization, just as an example, could exist, but it doesn't. But because we made this constellation, it kind of came somewhere in this middle ground of anomalies and mining. I think mining was actually an important concept, like in this sense, and kind of ingredient and things like this, and that is a generally interesting quality. This differential engine that because it kind of like provides a direction of designing states and systems of thought that pushes you to be unconventional beyond this sort of like like the usual or the known ways of doing it. And it also provides a lot of design room because the way the engine works affects how you think. Like there's a lot to discover in that direction because like we haven't tested many of those, but it's an interesting general quality in addition to this particular quality of the particular engine we're doing. And this is not to take away the emphasis from the particular engine because it's interesting, but I just wanted to note that there is this almost like a new design of thought processes playing somewhere above thought process engines. And I'm sad to throw that at the point when we really have to end, but if somebody has either good final comments or comments to that, go ahead.
This is a very short one, just like I'm very interested that if you play a few kind of scenes, it becomes easier kind of to develop new scenes because you start to see these like asks or deliveries or entrances and exits. It makes some kind of like a map-like economy where okay, these things are needed and these things are needed, and it becomes very interesting. Okay, how can I meet this and these demands or this and these gates and so on?
Yeah, that was kind of like my hunch. That's why the idea of like having these entrances and exits born out of the scenes, that maybe that works. And but I agree with you that that is a really interesting direction and kind of like a interesting way of approaching to a map that already has a kind of intelligence written in a way, like or like Any other last comments? But hey,
really
thanks.
Nice session. Yeah, it was really nice.
Yeah, I think it definitely was progress. In some ways it's hard to describe what the fuck happened, but I mean definitely there's progress, and it's good that we wrote so much because I think it's good to reflect on what we wrote of those things because like there's a lot there, but I think it's a really good direction and it will coagulate to something rather interesting or is already doing that. And with that I will stop.